Hello and welcome to Need to Know and DSR together in a special episode to provide therapy for those of you out there who are Democrats and who are feeling a little bit like, what the fuck is going on here? In order to address this question civilly and in warm, loving tones to one another, we've got two people we love. Tara McGowan of Courier Newsroom. We love you, Tara.
We love you back. I love you.
As I always say, I'm not a Democrat. I'm a McGowan-crat. And Simon Rosenberg. And Simon, I'd be a Rosenberg-crat too if it were an available option. Simon, of course, is of the Hopium Chronicles. So, how's your day, Tara?
Oh, started rough. I feel like I'm seeing light, but I think look, it's yeah, we're gonna get into it. The day is a mixed bag. There's a lot of feelings, I would say, today that we're all that we're gonna work through on
It's
this.
like that scene. It's like the scene in Mean Girls where they're doing the exercise and they're jumping off she says, I have so many feelings.
So many feelings.
I have so many feelings.
Tara has always, in my getting to know Tara in the last few years, she has taught me many things. But one of them is this concept of feeling your feelings. It's an important thing. There are lots of people feeling their feelings today. Many of them are not friendly feelings and happy feelings.
Many are very justified feelings.
Yeah, no, I'm not in any way. I'm not in any way impugning that whatsoever. I mean, I think what happened on Sunday night was a mistake, a huge mistake, and by 8 Democrats. But now the question is, what do we do? What do we do now?
Okay, come on. All right, let's just start there.
Yeah,
let's
go
just
ahead,
start. It wasn't 8 Democrats. Let's be honest, okay? Because it wouldn't just randomly have been 8 Democrats.
I was going to say it was 9.
Yeah, at least it was 9 Democrats, right? Former leader, not quite leader, Chuck Schumer was part of that crew. Otherwise, it wouldn't have happened this way. And, he goes and he says, I'm not for this. But either he's not for it, in which case he has no control, or he orchestrated it, which is the actual truth. But Simon, we want to be loving. And so let's say something lovely. What do you love about Chuck Schumer, Simon?
I don't, that's not relevant, David. I think that, this is obvious. Let's just take a step back, right? We have to note that we had this remarkable election last week, right? We won all over the country in huge margins. We had the election we all wanted to have, which is that it was a clear repudiation of Trump, which is what we all wanted. Many people who are listening and watching worked really hard to bring that about. And I wanted to say thank you to everybody who busted their ass to achieve something significant. And obviously what just happened was an incredible disappointment and momentum breaker. I think it was a misjudgment of the moment and understanding where we were and the fact that we were in a stronger position and Trump was weakening and had just been weakened. And I think that where there has been a huge error in many ways and this has been in our journey in learning about how to fight an autocrat, is that there's a basic lesson from history, right? That if you appease, they take more and they become emboldened. And if you look weak and they, if you signal weakness and division, they take more. And I don't think this was a smart move by us. I think this was a mistake to have done this, particularly at this moment when we had so much momentum coming out of the election. And so I am joining all of you in profound disappointment about what's happened in the last few days.
So, Tara, what do you love about Chuck Schumer?
It would be inappropriate to say because it would not be kind, actually. But I
I'm
Look,
trying to make this all about love, guys, and you're
yeah,
not going
no, I'm
along with
not. I'm not really on board with the hopium love train today.
Yeah.
We'll get there because I see silver linings in this, and one of those silver linings gets to your question, David. I love that this actually could be organized as the final, if not, or one of the final nails on the coffin of Chuck Schumer's leadership. I love that. I think that that's important because he has proven himself time and time again to not be able to do his job, which as minority leader is to hold his caucus together, to hold the line to oppose this administration. And I want to give credit where credit's due. He did work really hard to keep the caucus together to shut down the government initially. I was pleasantly surprised that they were able to pull that off because, as we all recall, he voted for the first CR. And he felt the brunt of that backlash. And so he was on board with holding the line this time around. But his job is to hold his caucus, and he failed, which is why I said 9 at the beginning, because it was the 7 Democrats. It was Angus King, the independent, who often caucuses with Democrats, and it was Chuck Schumer, who failed in his job. So that's just real. Everybody knows it. And David, you led with the point that like they're trying to make it seem as it was just these folks that are retiring or not up for reelection, but it was absolutely orchestrated. And you don't get to have it both ways right now, Chuck. You don't get to say that you didn't vote for it and you don't agree with it, but be the leader who couldn't hold your caucus.
Really would like to get to the silver linings playbook here, and I'd really like to get to what's good in all of this thing here. But in a moment. Simon, you said we won the election. But then you got to the other point, which is we had momentum. If the election was clear about one thing, it was that we want leaders who will stand up to Trump. In fact, I thought there was a great message of the election. And the message of the election was there's a lot of room in the Democratic Party for lots of different views, provided you are willing to sign on to just a couple principles. And one of them is that you are willing to stand up and fight for the people, Constitution, and against Trump and MAGA. Yeah, and if you can't get that last one, you don't even get to the point of what's the range of views.
Yeah.
And I think that's the problem here. But maybe you have a different view.
No, I don't. I mean, I think that this was, I think, a dramatic, as I said, a dramatic misread of the moment, and of the currents of where our politics is going. And just let me say one thing about the data from the elections. One of the things that just stands out to me is that in California, on the single ballot initiative where Gavin Newsom ran, a campaign against Trump, right? I mean, it was like a general election style campaign against Trump. We're going to have higher turnout in that race than the 2022 midterms, and which shows that this kind of no kings message against Trump, this idea of him being an autocrat, is central to everything that we are and we have to do. We also know from polling that Democrats went in right now have a 20+ point advantage on intensity. We'll see if it's still there, after what just happened. And that what was driving that wasn't healthcare and affordability. It was the threats to democracy in the sense that Trump's, trying to end American democracy and anoint himself a dictator is really this incredibly powerful driving force. I mean, fear and opposition to MAGA has been the most powerful thing in our politics going all the way back to 2018, the exception of the general election in 2024. And we could talk about that for forever and ever. But it is back now driving our politics in this powerful way. And you're right. If you can't understand that, if you can't understand severity of the threat, it's why I don't love this notion that this election was about affordability. I don't think that's true. Actually, as somebody who studies polling and studies all this stuff, there are 3 legs to our message stool right now. There's affordability, tariffs, and prices, and sort of falling back of the middle class and increasing struggle, healthcare, and then threats to democracy, no kings, corruption. And we are stronger when we're making all 3 of these arguments. And there's been a little bit, I think, of a weird kind of tendency to sort of single out one of them. I don't think we need to. I think we are appealing to a broad part of the electorate by making this argument. It was wildly successful last week. And we also know, just as we get through this bumpy period, right, and it is going to be ugly internally for a while, I assume, structurally, we have to recognize that a couple things happen. I'll do this very quickly. One is that in recent weeks, recent months, it wasn't just that the Republicans fell, is that we gained, right? We gained in party ID. We're 12 points higher than we were a year ago. We gained in the generic ballot. We now are more Americans believe that we can create prosperity and manage the economy, which has been a big issue for us. We are in a far stronger position as a national party than we were 3 or 4 months ago. And, we just had our first poll taken after the election last week. The morning consult poll just came out. Trump dropped to his lowest point in that poll, dropping even further because he's now a loser and not a winner, and he's a failure and not a success because he got his ass kicked in the election so bad. But I think the other point I think is that we know from history that when an off-year election happens like this, the likely scenario, not the guarantee, but the likely scenario is the blue wave continues next year. And what we have to be very focused on as we get through this ugly period, and we'll talk a little bit about what's going to happen in the upcoming budget negotiations, because I do think that this year-end budget, or which is now going to be in January, gives us enormous opportunities to communicate our values and what we're for and what we're fighting for. And we need to take advantage of that and to really put pressure on our electeds. But structurally, David, we're still in a much stronger position than they are heading into the next set of elections, heading into the budget negotiations. Trump is extraordinarily unpopular. His agenda is more so. He's in clear physical and cognitive decline. And so what we should be is our ambition should be growing, not receding. And that's one of the reasons that I'm so disappointed in what happened in the last few days.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to really follow up on a couple of things you said, but let me go to Tara and ask a tangential question. A friend of mine, colleague of mine, somebody I worked very closely with, had a breakfast with a senator this morning, Democratic senator, very well respected Democratic senator, not a hothead by any means. And the guy was fulminating, was just furious. And one of the core points the guy made was, if the Democrats are up by 8 points net over the Republicans, then they think 35 seats are within reach in the House elections. And his concern was that we were 6-ish, 7-ish, and 8 was in reach, and that this kind of thing will make people rethink that possibly, or some people want to sit that out. And that while, as Simon said, there's going to be another discussion come January, what are the odds that these 8 senators say, oh yeah, let's shut it down again? Oh yeah, let's stand strong again. 0. What do we get from that other discussion? One of the 8 senators said, well, we'll get a vote and we'll see where we stand on healthcare. And it's like, oh yeah? Didn't we have a vote in the spring? Don't we know where they stand on healthcare when they voted to cut it? Isn't there nothing new here that's positive? And is this guy right to be as angry as he is because he feels like we're squandering an opportunity?
We absolutely, no, they squandered the opportunity. I tend to agree with Simon because what I have repeated since the election last Tuesday is that Democrats won despite themselves. And I do believe that will happen again next year. And my exception is Zoran, obviously. I don't think that he won despite his strategy whatsoever, but I think other Democrats that did win in the gains we saw had very little to do with them and their messaging, and very much to do with a referendum on Trump and this administration and what's going on. And that will still exist next year. But enthusiasm is really important. And in this moment where we had enormous wind beneath our sails and Democrats were holding the line, for them to surrender in this moment, it is just so definitional for what the base already feels, right? That it reaffirms that we cannot trust you to rise to this occasion if you can't even understand that you're winning when you're winning. And you back off. And so I think it's, again, the folks that caved, including Schumer, they were never comfortable with the government shutdown strategy, right? And the way that they see it is that they're still operating in a system that no longer exists, right? They're still saying that they're going to operate in good faith, and they trust their Republican colleagues will too, when all of us, even the least engaged passive news consumer in the country, knows that that's a crock of shit, excuse my language. That is not true. And so they're sitting in the comfort of the belief system they have that's no longer accurate. They have angered the base now at a moment when the base was very, very happy and excited and cheering on the efforts of leadership for the first time in a year. And so I don't think it's going to have a massive impact on the election next year in a negative effect. I do think it'll tamp down some enthusiasm if we don't see real change in leadership between now and the midterms. Because we can't look to these leaders and trust them any longer. But I do think that there is an ability to shift the conversation, because it's very harmful for us, even that are the most angry and feeling our feelings, to keep the conversation focused on the weakness of
Yeah.
democratic leadership. And that's hard. That's a hard pill for us to swallow. That's why, Simon, my mantra is still so relevant. We do have to feel those feelings to get through them, and then we need to move forward. And what I'm more worried about now, because I have even less trust and faith, which is hard to admit, than I had 2 days ago in Democratic leadership, is how are they going to move forward in a way that is actually resonant with where people are, including the base, but not just the base, and not try to position this or posture or message this as a win. It is not. They need to move on, and they need to get back on offense. And right now they are now on defense. They just handed Trump and Republicans everything they wanted. And so I'm much more focused right now and interested in how we get back on offense, and not in a poll tested way talking about affordability, when we just made everything worse by those Democrats who caved for short term alleviation of pain, right? Which is real. They just handed over a green light for enormous pain in terms of SNAP cuts and healthcare premiums rising.
Yeah, for sure. Which, by the way, let's be 100% clear. The premiums are going to rise. They're not going to fix that. So I think need to keep that in mind when we evaluate this. But Simon, it's that portion of the program where we turn to hopium and we say, okay, it's not a good day. It's been a little bit rough. Um, but we have to go on living. How do we go on living individually, but more
Yeah.
importantly as a party?
So Tara just said a lot of things that I want to just quickly try to process and respond to. One is that, and David, you said something about the House. We also have had polling in the last few weeks showing us ahead in the Alaska Senate race, ahead in the Ohio Senate race, competitive in the Texas Senate races, depending on the candidate, ahead in the Maine Senate race, ahead in the North Carolina Senate race. Our gubernatorial candidate in Iowa was ahead in a poll in Iowa. And if the playing field has shifted between 7 and 12 points, and I don't think it's 5 or 6, I think it's more than that based on the results last week, then the Senate is also very much in play now, right? And that's why this matters so much, because they were sitting there in a way where everything was breaking towards them, and something that we thought was going to be potentially impossible was actually now possible. And they've made that more difficult, I think, because it's going to be harder for the family to kind of rally behind Chuck Schumer and the Senate Democrats now, for given what's happened, because this was such a slap in the face. So in terms of my optimism structurally, one is that we're still likely to be on track to have the kind of election that we want to have next year. If our goal daily, day in and day out, is a 3-part goal, as I describe it. One is to mitigate the damage they're doing. Second is to advance our agenda. And third is to win back power. We've had success in all of those areas in recent weeks, not the way that we wanted. But I think this next fight over the budget is going to be far more consequential than what we just went through, because they need 7 votes if this goes the way that every other budget has gone in recent memory, that there becomes a single omnibus at the end where everything is loaded together, then that budget's going to include the ICE increases It's going to include potentially the tariffs, depending on what happens with the Supreme Court case. It's going to include the gutting of healthcare and the vaporization of NIH and other, biomedical research. It's going to include the cuts to clean energy, which are raising electricity prices around the country. I mean, we can't vote for any of that. And so there is going to be an opportunity now for the Democrats in the House and Senate to draw a line in the sand on the final 60 votes. If you just got our votes to open the government up, but you're not going to get votes for a bill that has X, Y, and Z in it. And that's what we should be demanding now out of the Senate Democrats for what just happened, is that our demand should be that they make it clear that there are deal breakers in this final omnibus that won't get 7 Democratic votes. So don't even try it, or goad them into getting rid of the filibuster, which means that, they only got 50 votes on the big ugly bill. How the hell are they going to get 50 votes on a far uglier bill? And we can't give them cover for that bill that's going to come up. And so I do think we're entering a period where we are entering a new stage in this same argument, where we're going to have another ability to come back at it and make clear what we're for and what we're against. And I think our job as regular peeps in the family is to be demanding that of the Senate Democrats now, given what just happened. And so I think we're going to have another opportunity to relitigate some of this. And I think that the Republicans are in a far weaker position than they understand. The polling is, I think, going to continue to drop for them. I think Trump's decline has become impossible to ignore, and their thing looks really ugly and weak. And we got to get our shit together and go fight as hard as we possibly can for the American people on these 3 fronts, right? Affordability, opportunity, as Mikey Sherrill called it, liberty and prosperity, right? We need to be focusing on letting people get ahead, fixing healthcare, and protecting our democracy as sort of the 3 planks of our fight now. And I'm certainly at Hopium going to be demanding every day. I already asked all of the Hopium members this morning to call their electeds in the House and Senate and demand that we get behind some kind of cogent go-forward agenda that we can take into this next round of budget negotiations. And that's what I'm going to be focused on. Tara may feel that we're going to fail at that again. I don't know. I don't think we can anticipate
but
and
Simon,
understand that. Yeah.
we have absolutely no evidence to support that Chuck could get the 7 votes for that he couldn't get to hold the line here when we had the opportunity and the momentum and the win. So that's where I don't think we move forward. I love your hopium. I want that scenario to be true. The only way I see that being true is if Chuck Schumer steps down as leader, because he has lost the faith and trust of the base as a leader that can actually secure and hold his caucus to those votes. Because you're right, there's a lot of ways that we could build and use leverage in this moment. We need a leader who has the spine to do it and has the confidence of his caucus to hold the line. And we do not have that. So I know that it's not comfortable to talk about that and point fingers, but this is the thing Democrats have to do. If you fail at your one job of holding your caucus together to oppose this administration and protect the American people, then you should not have that job. And I have no faith or confidence that he can deliver on the job when he so far has failed every opportunity he's had.
David,
Simon, I want you to respond to it, but I want to say one thing that's just been eating at me on this whole thing, which is I'm old enough to remember the spring. I'm old enough to remember that vote, okay? When Chuck Schumer said, don't worry, we'll get him in the fall. And after he let that happen. So, how many strikes does he get, Simon?
We're done.
I just want to, I'm going to use, because when I'm with Tara, it reminds me of the things that she's taught me over the last few years in our various conversations, is that what surprises me about what just happened is that I felt that Schumer was actually stepping into his own power, right, to use a Tara phrase, right, and that the Democrats were stepping into their own power. And I don't understand. I still don't really understand what happened. I don't, and I'm sure we're all going to learn more about this in the coming days. And there needs to be much more cogent explanation, to all of us about the logic. And I understand that, people didn't want to see people suffering, and I understand all that. Like, I get it. And the suffering was real, and the air traffic control system was starting to crumble, and people were missing their 3rd paycheck, and soldiers were going hungry in Germany and all these things. This was all real. But we have to make a decision as a family, right, about where we really understand this moment in history to be. And I think one of the things that we should be demanding, those of us who are disappointed, is that historians like Ruth Ben Guyot and Heather Cox Richardson and Jason Stanley and others need to be coming in and sitting down with the Senate Democrats and walking them through this basic challenge that we have now, right? Which is that there are two lessons from history that live in my head every day. One is you appease a dictator, they take more. But the second one is that if we don't hang together, we're going to hang separately. That we have to, as Tara said, keep this thing together, and that this makes it harder for us to keep it together. And that is why we have to do both of these things simultaneously, which it sometimes may be in tension with one another. But in this case, we also appeased a dictator, and we also made it harder for us to keep our side together, because the way they win, and they win for 10 years or 20 years and not 2 years, is if we splinter and if we factionalize and if we view each other as the problem and not Trump and keep our eyes. This is why what Tara is saying is so important, is that we have to keep our eyes on what the real problem is in the country, which is them. And we have to, figure out how to get along. And to your point, David, last week, we were embracing the rainbow in the Democratic Party, right? We had Mandami winning, right? We had, national security Democrats winning. Gavin Newsom won out in California. Everybody won. It was a big, happy family. And I still can't really understand why the Senate Democrats who did this didn't wait, didn't give the victory more time to let us step even deeper into our own power and to have Trump, eat shit for days and days and days, right? I mean, look, on Thursday, this event where he fell asleep for 20 minutes, when the video was happening at his desk, it wasn't like he was in the crowd, at a dinner napping off. The friggin' event was in the Oval Office and he fell asleep for 20 minutes. I mean, it's not clear how much longer he's going to be able to do this job. Why would we bail him out after what was arguably the most single kind of disturbing public performance by a political leader in modern American history? Was this guy falling asleep, at his desk for 20 minutes with the cameras in his face? And so, yes, I'm frustrated and angry about what's happened. But I want to, and that's why we have to, in our contacts with these offices, we have to be teaching them what is expected of them now. And my recommendation to everyone who's watching and listening is that you should be calling your House member and your two senators every day, every single day, and telling them what you expect out of them that day. They need to hear from you now. It's very important, even if they're friendlies and even if they voted the right way and even if we have to give permission structure for our leaders to become more ambitious and to fight harder for all of us.
Yeah, okay, fine. Unity, fantastic, And, I hear all of them saying that stuff. And I have to tell you, and this may not resonate with you guys, but, I'm a dumb guy from New Jersey. And so, but I get the political news and I get the sports news. And the New York Giants football team fired their coach today in the middle of the season. And I was like,
Save the
okay,
season.
I
Save the
get it.
season.
Save the season. And then the Democrats, when their coach fucks up over and over again, they go, oh no, we have to have unity. Did this guy think we needed to have unity when there was a clear winner in the New York mayoral election and he couldn't utter the friggin' words out of his mouth? Hell no. He cares about unity that helps him. He doesn't care about unity that helps the party. There are 80 million Democrats who vote in elections. There's actually more than that if you actually do the right thing. So maybe the way you serve the 80 million is you say, I think we need to let these 8 go, or I think we need to let this one go in order to save the season.
Yes,
Tara.
I think that there are 2 ways where we actually turn what happened last night into a positive. And the first is exactly that, David. There's accountability. You fire the leader who failed to lead, and you do it as quickly as possible because that's going to bring the whole base back, Simon. like that, to show that level of strength and be able to put new leadership in and be like, nope, we've got a new plan, we've got a new path, we've got a new strategy. Number two is refocus the conversation on one of the major reasons the government was closed and Republicans wouldn't come to the table, and that's the Epstein files. And I know that that's not the most important issue facing Americans today, but let me tell you, it is the most effective conversation and issue to be talking about to put Trump and the White House and Republicans on defense. They have to swear Adelita in, who won her special election in Arizona and still has not been sworn in. She is the last signature needed to be able to get the resolution passed, to release the Epstein files. That needs to be agenda number one when they call the House back in session this week.
But come
wait,
on,
David, but
they're
hear me
not.
out. Hear me
They're
out.
not going to release the Epstein
Hear
files,
me out.
even
Right.
if they vote for it.
Right, but David, hear me out. Keeping the conversation on that does a number of things for us. One, everyone who's so angry right now, feeling their feelings, which they need to keep doing today, we need to pivot them so the narrative does not stay on Democrats are weak. We all know that they are, but we do need to move the narrative and move the communicators away from that into something productive. There is a special election. Simon, you'll love this. This is hopium. There is a special election December 2nd in Tennessee, right, for a House seat. It is a huge, huge, huge stretch seat. That is something that folks could actually focus on, because they did not want to swear Adelita in before that race because they wanted to neutralize her vote. There's potential. Everything's on the map, in my opinion, right now. And I think that this would be effective because this isn't about the conversation for voters today. This is about how do we get back on offense and how do we get Trump and the White House and Republicans back on defense.
Simon, for years now, I have admired everything that you have said about everything. But one of the things I admire the most is, and you said it all through the 2024 election and the run up to it, we have to be strong and reveal how they are weak.
Yeah.
You know, and you said it in hopium today.
Yeah.
Today, you made this point again. And the question is, how can we possibly be strong if we elevate or protect the weaklings?
Yeah, I think so I'm enjoying this conversation. It's great to be with the two of you. And
That's great. We're great to be with. Happy to be with you too.
Honestly, it's way more entertaining than when all three of us agree on everything.
No. But also, I'm also feeling my feelings too here, right? Like I'm not immune to this thing where I'm still trying to process what happened. I was surprised by it, to be honest. Given conversations that I had been having with people in the last 4 or 5 days. I didn't think this was going to happen on a Sunday. I thought I was going to have a fun, happy, joyous week for the first time in many years, and I was looking forward to having dinner with my wife and lots of things. And then fucking nuclear bomb dropped on Sunday, and so. But listen, I think all of these things are the discussion we have to be having, right? This is the appropriate, important conversation that we're having now. And what I wrote today, and we've talked about this on the show many times, is that Democrats seem to not really understand that about this issue of strong and weak. And it is central to how Donald Trump sees the world. It's central to how all strong men see the world. But it's always been central to him. And that, I showed some polling data from the election and I'm going to paraphrase the exact wording because I always forget it when I have to say this publicly, but it's essentially was from the exit polls last year is, who do you think is strong enough to govern, right? And to get things done? Not well-intentioned, not has a good agenda, but is tough enough to deliver for us and for people. And Trump won those voters by 50 points, 74-24. And we have to not just be well-intentioned and doing the right thing. We have to demonstrate that we are strong enough to actually deliver for people. And it's this sort of last piece that I think doesn't really get talked about adequately in the family when we do our research around issues and everything, is that we're just not seen as being tough enough to deliver, even if we're well-intentioned and that we want to do the right thing. This is one of the reasons why the emergence of people like Abigail Spanberger and Mikey Sherrill are kind of interesting, right? Because they're tough and they run to a fight. They use that language. And and that they won by these enormous margins in this race, a few days ago. I mean, beyond what any of us could have imagined in both those states. And I think that because people saw them as tough enough to be able to deliver for them in as governors. And this is where I think there's been a breakdown internally in our family, inside the conversations we have, that we can't look weak to him, because then we're encouraging him to do more and to be more destructive and to tear down both wings of the White House and not just the East Wing or whatever the hell he's going to do. And that's the signal we gave to him by what happened, is that we've encouraged our mad leader to have more ambition to do more harm to all of us. And that's where I think this was an incredible misread of the moment. And I don't really understand. I still don't really understand, why they did it. I don't understand the data and the logic behind it. And I also think that the timing of it was bananas. And so, yes, I think this was a huge mistake. However, to Tara's point, what we need to be doing now is to figuring out how to go win this next period of this discussion. Mike Johnson, as we were on discussing here, has called the House back. So that's a huge event that we needed to happen, because then Ada Leader Grahava comes back, and frankly, we're going to find out whether Mike Johnson and Donald Trump still have control over their conference. And I don't think they do. I think this rebellion by MTG and by others, I think the central reason they haven't called them back is because once this discharge petition on the Epstein files gets through, there could be more discharge petitions. They could have, I don't know that they retain ideological control of that body any longer. Mike Johnson, I think, has shrunk as a political figure. I think he's been severely damaged
That's saying
in the last few
something,
weeks.
since he started out as kind of daubing the House elf. But
I know. So I think that Tara's right, that bringing the House back and having them here and being with the senators and having this kind of full-on fight about the future direction of the country, the harms that Trump is doing to all of us, about his corruption, about what he did with he and Epstein, his best buddy, palling around. We need to be full on this 24/7, 365, because the central issue in our politics today isn't our weakness. It's really the harms they're doing to the country. And when Democrats were able to keep that front and center through the shutdown, we benefited dramatically from that. We helped won a big election through that. But now we need to do that all the time. And yes, of course, we've covered this. It got harder in the last few days, but now we got to get to the other side of this and develop a new strategy. And yes, we should be demanding a lot out of the senators that just did that dirty deed to help lead us in a far more combative way in the future. Tara may think it's not possible. I don't know.
It's a dead end.
Yeah, it may be. It may be. We only nobody voted for the reconciliation bill, right? And we just rolled back the tariffs, right? We got 51 votes in a Republican Senate to roll back the tariffs. You don't know, and certainly you can't score unless you shoot, and we got to try.
Okay. So I'm going to go to Tara for a last comment, but I want to pick up on what Simon is saying and say, it's still not too late for the message of the past week to be the way we win is to embrace strong Democrats, to convince people that we can stand up to Trump, to show unity around those principles. And what we got on Tuesday was not just two national security Democrats who were strong, although we got that with Spanberger and, of course, from my home state of New Jersey, Mikey Sherrill, who's been great one of the real surprising political stories of the past week that has just been ignored is how much she won by and how strong she has been, right? But Mamdani was a strong Democrat. Michelle Wu was such a strong Democrat in Boston, nobody wanted to run against her. Gavin Newsom was strong in standing up to Trump. The people, these two people, man or woman, who were the first Georgia statewide Democrats to win in years, strong Democrats. Same place after place after place.
Pennsylvania.
And Pennsylvania with the Supreme Court and so forth. And, it seems to me that if you take that and you take the widespread reaction to all of this, then we coalesce. And we say we need strong leaders who support strong Democrats, who are going to take a strong stand, and who are going to gently push aside, set aside, lock in the basement the weak Democrats, because we don't need those, and they are not going to help us. And that, that brings me to the final question that we always get to. Simon made a couple of points, Tara, about, what people should be doing in terms of calling people. What do we do from here on? And if you wish to address the issue of how do you get rid of Schumer, then please address it.
I do. I loved that hopium roundup from you, David. Though that was
Yeah.
unusual. It's true. No, I think look when the ship is sinking, you
When I see Simon wavering, I really feel like I got to help out here.
when your ship is sinking, you have to throw overboard the dead weight, and you have to put everybody else to work and roll up their sleeves. I think that's what needs to happen right now. Will it happen? I don't know. Hubris is really powerful. It's causing us a lot of harm and barriers to progress. But I agree with everything that you said as an assessment. I think that what people can do is, yes, keep calling, keep applying pressure, but don't lose sight of the common goal and the common threat, right? I've said multiple times, and Simon has repeated in this podcast, feel your feelings. That's really important. The only way out is through. We have to feel them, and then we need to move on, because the narrative can't be that Democrats are weak and wasted this opportunity for longer than a day or two. Give yourselves 2 days, maybe 3, and then we need to move on, and we get back to the business of actually fighting against this regime and getting back on offense. And I think that that's where this, for me, last night's failure, it was a failure of courage, and it was a communications failure. Because if you just say that, like, okay, they had no way out and they did not want to let the chaos and the starvation and the poverty that the Trump and Republicans were happy to have happen as a result of the government shutdown, if you are in agreement that there was no way out for them except to have a few concede and cave to move this forward, then you get ahead of that and you have a communication strategy to start to bring your base along to the fact that there are no good options here. Republicans are not coming to the table, and you tell a different story to move people in that direction, and you certainly don't do it within 1 week of those massive election wins.
Well, and on a Sunday, Tara, and on a Sunday.
But I'm in disagreement. They should have held the line because we had all of the power and momentum. But if you were going to cave the way they did, you at least bring folks along and not making it a shock to the base and the system on a Sunday.
Look, you also didn't have to cave. You didn't
I
saw some commentator going, well, the Democrats weren't winning. They were commenting on Angus Smith's comment that we were losing. And it's like, there's 2 problems with this. 1, we were winning. And 2, if you didn't like the strategy, capitulation wasn't the only option.
Correct.
Right? You could have taken something stronger. But when I listen to you guys talking about your feelings, which I love that, and I hope that this is very healthy for everybody, I'm reminded of the movie Analyze This, in which Robert De Niro's shrink, Billy Crystal, says, when you have a lot of feelings, hit your pillow. And of course, then Robert De Niro shoots his pillow because that's how he thinks of hitting his pillow. And Tara's right. You may have to hit your pillow a few times to get through this. But if we don't get strength out of this, if we don't drive home the message of strength, if we don't tell people clearly at top, bottom, in the middle of the party that strength is not the punchline here, if it's that strength is the thing that we need, we're going to fail. And the country's going to be fucked. And, there is no place for that. And got to tell you something, guys. These kind of group therapy sessions are really important for me. And I know they're really important for our listeners. And that regardless of how this comes out, my basic bar minimum for this party is, if you guys are in it, I'm in it. Any party you two are in, I'm happy to be. And I'm sure that's true for a lot of our listeners. So for now, thank you, Tara. Thank you, Simon. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And join us for more on subjects just like this here at Need to Know. Follow the Substack, support it if you like. At the DSR Network, support what we're doing at the DSR Network. At Hopium Chronicles. And also, I got to say, follow Tara on Instagram. She has a growing Instagram presence. I find it very therapeutic. And of course, Simon at the Hopium Chronicles and everywhere else, because he appears on just dozens of podcasts all the time. I'm a little jealous. And, keep it up, guys. We'll see you soon.
See
Bye-bye.
ya.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.